A mother sneaks into the dance studio and sees the teacher holding her 10-year-old daughter so close she can barely breathe. The girl's legs tremble non-stop, as if they were going to collapse at any moment. His smile is too calm, too controlled. Her gaze is too empty, lost in some distant place where no child should be. She whispers, her voice broken and trembling with fear, "Mom, please, don't tell anyone." That afternoon, at a simple dance class in Miami, Sarah Miller discovers something so alarming, so disturbing, that it forever changes the way she looks at any adult around a child. But to understand how we got here, how a dedicated mother went from admiring her daughter's teacher to feeling her heart race with dread whenever she heard his name, we need to go back a few weeks. We need to go back to the beginning, when everything seemed normal, when the sun was shining on the quiet streets of Orlando, and nothing indicated that Sarah and Emily's lives were about to enter a spiral of fear, doubt, and terrifying discoveries. Sarah Miller has always been a dutiful mother. At 42, she worked as a morning shift nurse at a busy hospital in downtown Orlando, Florida. She woke up every day at 5:30 a.m., prepared breakfast for her and her daughter, organized the lunchbox with care, folded the clothes that had just come out of the dryer the night before. It was a routine she had painstakingly built after her divorce 3 years ago. Since then, Sarah raised Emily alone and made sure that the girl never missed anything, especially love and attention. Emily Miller was 10 years old and shy by nature. She had light brown hair that fell to her shoulders, always tied in a ponytail when she went to school, and big, curious eyes that sparkled every time she talked about dancing. She loved ballet since she was a little girl, dreamed of dancing on Broadway one day, and spent hours twirling around in the living room, pretending that the living room carpet was a huge, illuminated stage. Sarah has always supported this dream. He worked overtime when he could afford to pay for dance lessons, bought new tights whenever Emily grew up, attended all the rehearsals and performances, applauding with tears in his eyes. Their routine was simple, but full of affection. Every morning, Sarah woke Emily with a kiss on the forehead, and the two had breakfast together in the small kitchen of their rented apartment in a quiet, middle-class neighborhood. They talked about the day's plans, about their friends from school, about Emily's dreams. The girl always smiled, always told her mother everything. Sarah thought she knew her daughter better than anyone else in the world. He thought he knew exactly when something was wrong, when Emily was sad or worried. But as he would later discover, it is not always easy to see what is hidden behind a forced smile. In August of that year, Emily began attending a new dance school. It was a small studio, but well-spoken among the mothers of the neighborhood, located in a typical American strip mall, with a glass facade, ample parking lot, and a United States flag waving at the entrance. The place was only a 15-minute drive from Emily's regular school, in a safe area full of shops, cafes, and families strolling around with strollers. Sarah had done a lot of research before enrolling her daughter there. She read comments on the internet, talked to other mothers, visited the place twice before signing the contract. Everything seemed perfect. The lead teacher of children's ballet was Ethan Cole, a 35-year-old man, thin, always well-dressed, with a polite smile and a soft voice. He had recently moved to Orlando from somewhere in the north of the country, and moms loved to talk about how caring, patient, and talented he was. Ethan had a background in classical and contemporary dance, said he had studied in New York, and always praised the girls warmly, making them feel special. Sarah was impressed on the first day. He greeted Emily looking into her eyes, crouched down to stand at the girl's height, and said with a gentle smile, "You'll love dancing here, Emily. I see you have a special talent." The special word stayed in Sarah's head. At the time, she thought it was beautiful, comforting. After all, what mother doesn't want to hear that her daughter is special? But weeks later, that same word would be repeated so many times, in so many strange contexts, that Sarah would start to feel butterflies in her stomach whenever she heard it. On the first day of school, Emily returned home radiant. He got into the car with his face flushed, his eyes shining, and talked endlessly about the steps he had learned, about the giant mirror that covered the entire wall, about the music that played during the warm-up. Sarah drove smiling, relieved to see her daughter so happy. It seemed that everything was going well. It seemed that Emily had finally found a place where she could grow as a dancer. But as they talked, Sarah noticed something small, barely noticeable. When Emily mentioned the teacher's name, she squeezed the strap of the dance backpack hard. Her fingers turned white from pressure. It was just an instant. Soon after, Emily smiled again and talked about the choreography. Sarah blinked, shook her head slightly, and thought she was seeing things. Maybe it was just tiredness. Maybe it was just the girl's anxiety in a new environment. But that gesture did not leave her head. Over the next few days, Sarah began to observe more closely. She had always been an attentive mother, but now she paid attention to every detail. When she left Emily at the studio door, she noticed how the girl took a deep breath before entering, as if she was preparing for something difficult. When she picked up Emily at the end of class, she noticed that the girl left more tired than usual, with her knees marked red, her leotard damp with sweat, and an eerie silence that hadn't existed before. Emily had always been quiet, but that silence was different. It was heavy. It was as if she was holding something inside, something she didn't know how to say. Sarah tried to strike up a conversation several times. In the car, on the way back home, she asked lightly, "How was it today, my love? Did the teacher teach anything new?" Emily always answered with short sentences, a yes or no, or a good one. It wasn't normal. Normally, Emily loved to tell every detail of the day, every joke a friend had made, every new step she had learned. But now, she just looked out the window, fiddled with her nails, and changed the subject quickly. Sarah tried to convince herself that it was just a phase. Children change, grow, become more reserved. Maybe Emily was entering an age where she no longer wanted to share everything with her mother. Maybe that was it. But deep down, Sarah felt that there was something more. Something wrong. Something she couldn't understand. But it was there, right in front of her, waiting to be discovered. One afternoon, when she went to pick up Emily from class, Sarah arrived 5 minutes early. She parked her car in the strip mall parking lot and walked to the entrance of the studio. The glass door was open, and she could see the interior corridor lined with mirrors and posters of famous ballerinas. There were folding chairs leaning against the wall, where other mothers used to sit and wait. Sarah stood, looking out the window that overlooked the dance room. The music was playing softly, a soft piano melody. She could see the girls lined up in a row, making movements with their arms, concentrated. Ethan was in the center of the room, correcting the posture of one of the students, lightly touching her shoulder to adjust the position. Everything seemed normal. Everything seemed safe. But then Sarah saw something that made her heart tighten. In the corner of the room, near the back door, Emily was standing alone, staring at the floor. She seemed to be waiting for something, or someone. Sarah frowned. Why wasn't Emily dancing with the others? Why was she there, alone, standing, with her arms crossed and her face tense? Before Sarah could understand what was happening, Ethan approached Emily. He put his hand on her shoulder, tilted his head, and whispered something in the girl's ear. Sarah couldn't hear it, but she saw Emily's reaction. The girl swallowed, nodded, and her hands began to shake slightly. Ethan smiled, patted her lightly on the shoulder, and returned to the center of the room, as if nothing had happened. Sarah felt butterflies in her stomach. Was it just an impression? Or was there something wrong with that gesture? She stood there, watching, her heart beating faster. The class continued normally. The girls danced, laughed, Ethan praised them all, and soon the sound of a bell signaled the end of the class. The girls ran out of the room, grabbed their backpacks, and went to meet the mothers who were waiting in the hallway. Emily was one of the last to leave. She walked slowly, with her head down, and when she saw Sarah waiting, she forced a quick smile. Sarah crouched in front of her daughter, held her face with both hands, and asked softly, "Is everything okay, my love? You look tired." Emily looked away and muttered, "I'm fine, Mom. Just tired." Sarah insisted, "You were standing alone in the corner of the room. Did something happen?" Emily shook her head quickly. No, it's just that the teacher said that I'm going to have a special class after normal hours. He said that I have talent and that he wants to teach me some more difficult steps." "It's a surprise, Mum. He asked me not to tell anyone until the day of the performance." That word again, special. And now accompanied by another word that made Sarah feel an even greater tightness in her chest. Secret. Sarah forced a smile, ran her hand through her daughter's hair and said, "That's cool, honey, but you know you can tell me everything, right? You don't need to keep secrets from me." Emily nodded, but said nothing more. He just grabbed his backpack and walked towards the car. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep properly. She lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the scene in her head. Perhaps he was exaggerating. Maybe it was just an affectionate way of the teacher to encourage the students. After all, he was praised by all mothers. He was seen as a dedicated professional, someone who truly cared about girls' progress. But why did he ask Emily not to tell anything? Why a secret? Sarah knew from experience that secrets between adults and children were rarely a good thing. She tried to convince herself that she was just tired from the shift at the hospital, that she was seeing things where there was nothing, but that little gesture, that tap on the shoulder, that whisper in Emily's ear, wouldn't leave her head. If you've made it this far, it's because real history interests you. Help this content reach more people. Leave the like, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell. In the following weeks, the routine continued, but the signs began to become clearer and clearer. Sarah took Emily to class 3 times a week, always at 5 in the afternoon. The studio was full of girls between the ages of 7 and 12, all dressed in colorful tights, hair tied up in perfect buns, chatting animatedly as they waited for class to start. The smell of children's deodorant mixed with the smell of waxed wood filled the hallway. There were huge mirrors everywhere, reflecting the yellowish light of fluorescent lamps. Rows of mothers sitting on folding chairs talked about school, about their children, about the upcoming recitals. Sarah was always there, watching. She tried to appear carefree, fiddling with her phone, pretending to read something. But in fact, she was keeping an eye on everything. I watched how Ethan interacted with the girls, how he smiled, how he touched their shoulders to correct their posture. Everything looked professional. Everything seemed normal. But then, at the end of each class, Sarah noticed that Emily was always one of the last to leave, always. While the other girls grabbed their backpacks and ran into their mother's arms, Emily stayed behind, talking to Ethan, listening to instructions, nodding. Sarah once asked another mother, a blonde woman in her 40s named Jennifer, if she also thought it was strange that the teacher asked some girls to stay after class. Jennifer frowned, surprised by the question, and replied with a smile, "Oh, that's super normal. My daughter has also stayed a few times. Ethan is a sweetheart, you know. He dedicates himself even to the girls who have the most potential. It is rare to find such a teacher nowadays." Sarah forced a smile and nodded, but inside she felt a huge weight. Was it just her seeing something wrong? Was he going crazy? All the other mothers seemed to trust Ethan completely. He was seen as an angel, a second father, someone who really cared. But Sarah couldn't ignore what she saw in Emily's eyes. The girl was different, quieter, more distant, and always, whenever he talked about the extra classes, his hands trembled slightly, as if he felt cold, even in the sweltering heat of Florida. One night, over dinner at home, Sarah decided to try again. She prepared Emily's favorite dish, macaroni and cheese, and sat next to her daughter at the small kitchen table. The fridge was filled with colorful school magnets, old drawings of Emily taped together, pictures of the two smiling in a park. It was a safe, welcoming environment where Emily had always felt comfortable talking about everything. Sarah started slowly with a light tone. "Honey, tell me something. What exactly happens in these special classes you have with Professor Ethan?" Emily had a fork in her hand, about to bring a piece of pasta to her mouth. She stopped in mid-motion, swallowed, and looked away. "It's no big deal, Mom. He only teaches me a few new steps. Harder steps, you know? For presentation." Sarah insisted, trying to keep her voice calm. "And why is it a secret? Why can't you tell me what you do?" Emily stirred the noodles with her fork, without eating. She seemed to be choosing her words carefully. "It's because it's a surprise, Mum. The teacher said that if I tell anyone, it will spoil the surprise of the show. He said that it is important that it is secret until the day of the presentation." Sarah felt her heart tighten. She placed her hand on Emily's hand, which was shaking slightly. "But baby, you know you don't have to keep secrets from me, right? I am your mother. If something makes you uncomfortable, you can tell me, always." Emily looked at her mother with her eyes shining, as if she were about to cry, but then she shook her head quickly, forced a smile, and said, "No, Mom, it's all right. I like the classes. The teacher is nice. It's just that it's special, you know. He said I'm special." That word again. Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. She wanted to ask more, she wanted to insist, but Emily had already gotten up from the table, took the plate to the sink, and said she was tired and was going to bed early. Sarah stood there, alone in the kitchen, staring at the half-full plate of food that Emily had left behind, and felt that she was losing control of the situation. Something was going on, and she didn't know what it was. But I knew, in my heart of hearts, that it was not good at all. That night, Sarah didn't sleep. She lay in bed, listening to the silence of the apartment, and mentally repeated every word Emily had said. Is it just nervous? Or is there something wrong behind that closed door? The next morning, Sarah took Emily to regular school, a simple public institution in a middle-class neighborhood with low red brick buildings, an American flag on the flagpole, and outdoor sports courts. After leaving her daughter at the door, Sarah went to work at the hospital, but was unable to concentrate. During her shift, while attending to patients, checking vital signs, and administering medications, her mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about Emily, about the trembling hands, about the secret she kept, about that teacher everyone loved, but who, to Sarah, was starting to look more and more suspicious. In the afternoon, when she went to pick up Emily to take her to dance class, Sarah paid attention to every detail. In the car, as she drove through the tree-lined streets of Orlando, she looked sideways at her daughter, who was sitting in the passenger seat, looking out the window. Emily was biting her nails, a habit she had given up for months, but now she had come back with a vengeance. Her knees swayed non-stop, rising and falling in a nervous rhythm. Sarah asked lightly, "How are you, love? You look nervous." Emily stopped biting her nails for a moment, looked at her mother, and replied too quickly, "I'm fine, Mom, just excited for the class." But Sarah knew when her daughter lied. He knew every expression, every tone of voice. And that wasn't animation. It was fear. It was anxiety. It was something Emily was trying to hide, but it leaked out with every gesture, every look averted. When they got to the studio, Sarah parked the car and said, "I'm going to come in with you today. But I want to see the class." Emily became rigid on the bench. Her eyes widened and she said quickly, "No need, Mom. You always stay in the car, remember?" Sarah smiled, trying to look casual. "I know, love. But today I want to see. It's been a while since I've attended a full class." Emily opened her mouth as if to say something, but then just nodded and got out of the car. They walked together to the entrance of the studio. Inside, the hallway was full of mothers and girls. Sarah greeted some acquaintances, exchanged polite smiles, and sat down in one of the folding chairs, leaning against the wall. She had a clear view of the dance room through the glass window. The class started normally. The girls came in, warmed up, and Ethan began teaching a new choreography. Sarah watched everything carefully. He was a really good teacher. He explained the steps clearly, praised the girls, corrected his posture in a gentle way. Everything seemed perfect. But then, in the middle of class, Sarah noticed that Ethan was repeatedly looking at Emily. It wasn't a normal look. It was a longer, more intense look. Sarah felt her stomach turn. She tried to convince herself that she was seeing things, but she couldn't ignore the bad feeling that took over her chest. When the class ended, the girls started to leave. Sarah got up from her chair, ready to fetch Emily, but then he saw Ethan approach his daughter and whisper something in her ear. Emily nodded, glanced quickly at her mother through the window, and returned to the center of the room. Sarah frowned. What was going on? She approached the door of the living room and knocked lightly on the glass. Ethan looked at her, smiled politely, and came to the door. He opened only a crack and said in a soft voice, "Hi, Sarah. How are you? Emily will stay a few more minutes today. We are rehearsing a special part of the choreography, but don't worry, it will be ready soon." Sarah felt her heart race. She forced a smile and asked, "Can I stay and watch?" Ethan made a sorry expression and said, "Oh, actually, I'd rather Mothers didn't see it yet. It's a surprise for the recital, but I promise I'll take good care of her. You can wait in the hallway if you want, or come back in half an hour." Sarah didn't know what to say. All the other mothers seemed to trust that man. He was loved, respected, but something inside her screamed that something was wrong. She looked at Emily, who was standing in the center of the room, looking at the floor, her trembling hands at her sides. Sarah wanted to get in. She wanted to take her daughter and run out of there, but there was no reason. There was no proof of anything, just a gut feeling, an irrational fear that he could not explain. She muttered, "All right, I hope." Ethan smiled, closed the door, and pulled the inner blinds, something Sarah had never seen there before. The room was hidden from the view of those in the hallway. Sarah stood there, staring at that closed door, her heart racing and her hands shaking. She went back to her chair, sat down, and waited. Every minute seemed like an eternity. She looked at her cell phone watch, watched the minutes pass slowly, and felt the anxiety grow inside her chest. What would he be doing inside with Emily? Why were the blinds closed? Why did no one but her find that strange? Half an hour later, the door opened. Emily came out with her face flushed, her hair disheveled, and her legs shaking so much that she almost tripped when she took the first step. Sarah jumped up, ran to her daughter, and held her shoulders. "Emily, what happened? Are you okay?" Emily nodded quickly, but didn't look her mother in the eye. "I'm fine, Mom, just tired." It was a hard class. Sarah looked back and saw Ethan standing in the doorway of the room, smiling as if nothing had happened. He waved at Sarah and said she was great today, really special. Sarah took Emily's hand, which was cold and shaky, and the two left the studio in silence. In the car, Sarah tried to talk, but Emily didn't want to talk. She just looked out the window, hugging her backpack, her body tense and her face pale. Sarah drove home with a heavy heart, promising herself she wouldn't stop there. Something was wrong. She knew, and he was going to find out what it was, even if it was the last thing he did. If this revelation is arousing in you a deep curiosity about what really happened, comment right now, "I want more stories," and please leave your like on this video. It was a rainy Saturday when Sarah received a text message from the dance studio. It said that there would be a special workshop in Miami, about a 4-hour drive from Orlando, and that some selected students had been invited to participate. Emily was among them. Sarah hesitated. Miami was far away, and the idea of letting her daughter spend the whole day there, away from her, made her stomach turn. But Emily looked excited, or at least he tried to look like it. Sarah accepted, saying she would go along. On Saturday morning, they hit the road early. Sarah drove down Florida's highways while Emily slept in the passenger seat. The sky was gray, laden with heavy clouds that promised rain. Sarah turned on the radio quietly, trying to calm her mind, but she couldn't stop thinking about the past few weeks. In Emily's tremors, in the words secret and special repeated so many times, in that blank look that her daughter had every time she left extra classes. By the time they arrived in Miami, the workshop had already begun. The studio was larger than Orlando's, with mirrored walls, professional lights, and a small stage in the background. There were several girls of different ages, all dressed in colorful tights, stretching their legs, talking animatedly. Ethan was there, talking to other teachers, laughing, being the center of attention as always. He waved to Sarah and Emily when he saw them enter and came up to them with a warm smile. "I'm glad you came. Emily will love this workshop. It's going to be an amazing day for her." Sarah forced a smile and said, "Can I stay and watch?" Ethan made a doubtful expression and replied, "Well, we usually ask parents to wait in the rest area. It's for girls to be more comfortable, you know. But rest assured, it will be safe and a lot of fun." Sarah wanted to insist, but she didn't want to appear paranoid in front of everyone. She kissed Emily on the forehead, whispered, "Anything, call me, okay?" and went to the waiting area, a small lobby with worn leather couches and a coffee machine. She sat there for hours, fiddling with her cell phone, trying to read something but unable to concentrate. From time to time, I heard music coming from the studio, girls' laughter, clapping. Everything seemed normal. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. At 9 p.m., when the workshop finally ended, Sarah entered the studio to pick up Emily. Most of the girls had already left. The place was almost empty, silent, only the dim lights in the hallway still on. Sarah walked to the women's locker room, pushed the door open, and froze. Emily was sitting alone on a wooden bench, hugging her legs to her chest. The leotard was damp with sweat, clinging to the small body. Her hands were shaking violently, and she was breathing too fast, as if she had just run a marathon. Her face was pale, her eyes red, her cheeks stained with tears that she had tried to hide. Sarah ran to her daughter, crouched in front of her, and held her face with both hands. "Emily, what happened? Are you okay?" Emily looked up at her mother, and Sarah saw there a fear she had never seen before. A deep, visceral fear that made her heart break. Emily swallowed hard and said in a trembling voice, "It's just anxiety, Mum. Presentation anxiety. The teacher said it's normal. He insisted on training with me until later. He said that I need to get used to the pressure." Sarah looked at the clock on the wall. It was almost 9 in the evening. The building was empty. All the other girls had been gone for hours. Why had Emily been alone until that time? What had Ethan been doing to her all this time? Sarah felt butterflies in her stomach, a dread that rose from her stomach and took over her whole body. She hugged Emily tightly, feeling her daughter's body tremble against hers, and whispered, "Let's go home, my love. Now." On the way back to Orlando, Sarah drove quietly. Emily slept the whole way, curled up in the seat, hugging her backpack. Sarah looked at her from time to time, saw the dried tears on her daughter's face, saw the hands that still trembled even in her sleep, and felt a fury grow inside her. Something was wrong, something terrible was happening, and she was going to find out what it was. But what happened in the next few hours would destroy all the certainties she had. Back in Orlando, Sarah tried to move on but couldn't. The image of Emily, sitting alone in that locker room, shaking, breathing too fast, didn't leave her head. Sarah began to ask more direct questions. At home, in the simple kitchen with the fridge full of school magnets, old drawings of Emily, photos of the two smiling, Sarah prepared macaroni and cheese and tried to strike up a conversation. "Emily, tell me something. What exactly happens when all the other girls leave and you're left alone with the teacher?" Emily was sitting at the table, fidgeting with her fork, without looking up from her plate. She swallowed, looked away, and replied in a low voice, "We just rehearse, Mum. He teaches me some more difficult steps. It is important for the presentation." Sarah leaned forward, trying to catch her daughter's gaze. But why does it have to be a secret, love? Why can't you tell me? Emily bit her lower lip, her eyes shining as if she were about to cry. She let go of her fork, which fell on the plate, making a noise, and said in a trembling voice, "Because it's a secret of the choreography, Mom," the teacher asked. "He said that if I tell anyone, it will spoil the surprise of the show. He said it is important that no one knows. Neither do you." Sarah felt her heart tighten. She held Emily's hand, who was cold and shivering. "But baby, does he touch you? During the spins, during the training, does he touch you in a way that makes you uncomfortable?" Emily pulled her hand back too fast and got up from the table. "No, Mom, it's not like that at all. You're thinking the wrong things. He is a good teacher. He just wants to help me." And then, before Sarah could say anything else, Emily ran into the room and slammed the door. Sarah stood there, alone in the kitchen, staring at the plate half full of food, feeling her legs wobbly and her heart broken. She had asked the wrong question. It had scared Emily, but I couldn't go back now. She needed to find out the truth, even if it meant facing her daughter, facing the teacher, facing the whole world. That night, Sarah spent hours awake, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. She mentally repeated every word Emily had said, every gesture, every averted look. Is it just nervous? Or is there something wrong behind that closed door? If you're here so far, it's because this story is stirring you. What follows will show the exact moment when everything changed. Therefore, at the end of this video, we will reveal the complete outcome with details that few know. Stay with me until the end. The next morning, Sarah took Emily to regular school. The day was hot, the sun shining brightly on the tree-lined streets of Orlando. Mothers left their children at the door, waved, smiled. Everything seemed so normal, so safe. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was living in two different worlds. One where everything seemed fine, where people smiled and trusted each other, and another where dark secrets were hidden behind closed doors, where children trembled with fear and adults pretended nothing was happening. After dropping Emily off, Sarah made her way to the cafe in front of the dance studio. She ordered a black coffee and sat at a table near the window from where she could see the entrance to the studio. She didn't really know what she was doing there. I just knew I needed to understand. I needed to see. I needed to find out if I was going crazy or if there really was something wrong. While sipping coffee, Sarah noticed two mothers she knew from the studio. They entered the cafe, laughed, talked animatedly. Sarah took a deep breath and walked over to them. "Hi, girls. Can I sit with you?" They both smiled and waved for her to sit down. Sarah pulled up a chair, joined them, and after a few minutes of casual conversation, she said carefully, "Have you ever noticed that Professor Ethan asks some girls to be alone after class?" The two exchanged glances, and then one of them, a brunette woman of about 45 years named Linda, replied, "Oh yes, my daughter has stayed a few times. It's an extra job he does with the girls who have more talent. I think it's beautiful of him, you know. Nowadays it is rare to find such a dedicated teacher." The other mother, Jessica, nodded. "It's true. My daughter loves these extra classes. She says that the teacher is like a second father. He truly cares about their progress." Sarah felt a huge weight on her chest. She tried to smile, but her voice came out trembling as she said, "But don't you think it's strange that he asks the girls not to tell what they do in these classes? What does he call a secret?" Linda frowned, as if she didn't understand the concern. "Ah, but it's only because he's preparing a surprise for the recital. It's cute, right? The girls are excited about the secret." Sarah didn't know what to say. She looked at the two women, saw the quiet faces, the confident smiles, and felt that she was completely alone. No one saw what she saw. No one felt what she felt. Was she really crazy? Was he creating a problem where there was none? She thanked him for the conversation, got up and left the cafe. Inside the car, alone, Sarah put her hands on the wheel and took a deep breath. She knew she needed proof. I needed something concrete. Something that showed that he wasn't making it up, that he wasn't exaggerating. But how? How to find out what was happening behind that closed door? It was then that Sarah had an idea. She was going to put an audio recorder in Emily's backpack. I would listen to what happened during those extra classes. I was going to find out the truth, once and for all. That afternoon, before taking Emily to dance class, Sarah discreetly entered her daughter's room. She opened her dance backpack, took out the water bottle, and placed at the bottom, hidden among her clothes, a small audio recorder she had bought at the mall's electronics store. His hands trembled as he did so. She felt guilty, as if she was invading her daughter's privacy. But at the same time, I knew I had to do it. He needed to protect Emily, even if it meant acting behind his back. When Emily got home from school, Sarah was waiting with a forced smile. "Ready for class, my love?" Emily nodded silently, grabbed her backpack and got into the car. The journey to the studio was silent. Emily stared out the window, biting her nails, her knees swaying nervously. Sarah looked at her from time to time, her heart sinking, and thought, "Please let me be wrong. Please let it be nothing." When they arrived at the studio, Sarah left Emily at the door, gave her a kiss on the forehead and said, "Good class, my love. See you in a little while." Emily walked in without looking back. Sarah sat in the car in the parking lot, waiting. Every minute seemed like an eternity. She looked at her watch, saw the hands move slowly, and felt the anxiety grow inside her chest. What was she going to hear on that recording? Was he going to discover something terrible, or was he just going to confirm that he was being paranoid? 2 hours later, Emily left the studio. She walked slowly to the car, entered quietly, and put her backpack in the back seat. Sarah drove home, trying to look normal, talking about the day, about school, about anything. Emily answered with monosyllables, looking out the window, distant. When they got home, Sarah said she was going to take a shower and went upstairs to the bedroom. But in fact, she grabbed Emily's backpack, pulled out the tape recorder, plugged in her headphones, and sat up on the bed. His hands trembled as he pressed play. At first, there was only noise. Loud music, girls' laughter, footsteps hitting the wooden floor. Sarah heard Ethan's voice giving instructions, praising the girls, correcting movements. Everything seemed normal. Everything seemed safe. Sarah began to relax, thinking that maybe she was really exaggerating. But then, after about 40 minutes of recording, the music stopped. There was a long silence. Sarah turned up the volume, brought her headphones closer to her ears, and heard Ethan's voice, low, almost a whisper. "Well done, girls. They can leave. Emily, you stay. Let's work on something special." Sarah heard the sound of footsteps, of girls laughing, of doors closing, and then silence. A heavy, heavy silence. And Ethan's voice, now closer. "Now it's just you and me, Emily. Let's do the special part. Remember, the one who can't tell anyone." Sarah felt the blood run cold in her veins. She heard Emily's breathing, quick, panting. She heard her daughter's voice, trembling, small. "Okay, teacher." And then the sound of movements. Steps, breaths. Ethan whispering, "Yes, like that. Relax. Trust me. You're special, Emily. Very special." The recording cut off. The music had returned, loud, drowning out any other sound. Sarah took off her headphones, threw the tape recorder on the bed, and felt the world spin. She hadn't been able to hear everything. He had no concrete evidence. But she had heard enough to know she was right. Something was happening, something terrible, something she needed to stop before it was too late. Sarah sat on the bed, her hands shaking, her heart racing, and tears streaming down her face. She didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to act, but I knew I couldn't wait any longer. He needed to see it with his own eyes. I needed to get into that room. She needed to find out the truth before it was too late for Emily. If this story is already changing the way you see maternal protection, like, subscribe and activate the bell in this video so that this message reaches other mothers. Over the next few days, Sarah began to follow Emily discreetly. She pretended to leave after leaving her daughter at the studio, but in fact parked the car on the next street, from where she could see the entrance to the building. She was there, watching, waiting, trying to understand what was happening. One afternoon, she saw Ethan leave the studio with Emily by her side. They walked to a nearby cafe, sat at a table outside, and talked for about 20 minutes. Sarah couldn't hear what they were saying, but she could see the way Ethan leaned close to Emily, how he touched her shoulder, how he smiled in a way that made Sarah's stomach turn. She took out her cell phone, took some photos from afar. They weren't very clear photos, but they showed Ethan and Emily together, in a context that went beyond the classroom. Sarah knew that this was not normal. Teachers do not take students to have coffee alone. They don't touch them so intimately. They don't create secrets with 10-year-olds. Once, Sarah pretended to have forgotten Emily's water bottle and returned to the studio in the middle of class. She opened the door slowly, entered the silent hallway, and walked to the door of the dance room. The hallway was almost empty. The strong smell of hairspray and childish sweat filled the air. She heard the muffled sound of music coming from behind the door, a soft violin sound mixed with electronic beats. Sarah tried to look through the glass of the door, but the inner blinds were closed. She couldn't see anything. I just heard the music, low, and every now and then a sound of footsteps hitting the ground. She took a deep breath, gathered her courage, and knocked lightly on the door. The music stopped. There was a brief silence, and then the door opened only a crack. Ethan appeared with a smile that was too polite, too controlled. "Hi, Sarah. How are you? Any problem?" Sarah forced a smile and said, "Oh no, it's just that Emily forgot the bottle of water. I came to bring it." Ethan held out his hand. "You can let me give it to her. We are in the middle of an important part of the choreography. We don't want to interrupt now." Sarah looked over his shoulder, trying to see what was going on inside, but Ethan blocked the view. She insisted, "Can I enter just a minute? I wanted to say hi to her." Ethan kept his smile, but Sarah noticed that his eyes grew colder. "Seriously, Sarah, it's better not. The girls get distracted when their mothers come in, but thank you for bringing the bottle." "I give it to Emily." And then he closed the door, gently but firmly. Sarah stood there, staring at that closed door, feeling her heart race and her hands tremble. She got back in the car, sat in the driver's seat, and felt the tears run down her face. She was right. I knew I was. But no one believed her. No one saw what she saw. She was completely alone. That night, Sarah could barely sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence of the apartment. From time to time, he would get up and go to Emily's room, just to see if her daughter was okay. Emily slept, curled up under the blanket, hugging a teddy bear she had received years ago. Sarah stood there in the doorway, staring at this helpless child, and felt a mixture of love and fear, so strong that she could hardly breathe. She thought about going to the police. But what would you say? That the daughter's teacher was too kind, that he used words like special and secret, that Emily trembled after school? He had no concrete evidence, only suspicions, just an instinct that screamed inside her, telling her that something was terribly wrong. It was on a rainy night, while Sarah was lying in bed, unable to sleep, that her cell phone vibrated. It was a message from an unknown number. Sarah frowned, unlocked her phone, and opened the message. What she saw made her sit up in bed, her heart racing. It was a blurry photo taken from afar, through the window of the dance studio. In the photo, Sarah could see Emily and Ethan alone in the living room. He was behind her, holding her waist with both hands, so close that the bodies almost touched. Emily's legs seemed to bend, as if they could barely stand. Her face was turned to the side, her expression tense, her eyes closed. Below the photo, there was a simple, short, but devastating message. "You know your daughter is always last with him, right?" Sarah felt her stomach turn. The world turned. She got up from the bed, staggered to the bathroom, and vomited. His hands trembled so badly he could hold his cell phone. She wiped her mouth with trembling hands, washed her face with cold water, and looked at her own reflection in the mirror. Her eyes were swollen, her face pale, and for the first time in weeks she saw what was really happening to her. I was exhausted. She was scared. But most of all, she was more determined than ever. Someone had sent her that photo. Someone knew what was going on. Someone was on her side, and now Sarah had proof, however blurred, albeit from an unknown number, that she was not mad, that he was not inventing anything, that her daughter was in real danger, and that she needed to act now, before it was too late. Sarah went back to her room, took out her cell phone, and looked at the photo again. He enlarged the image, tried to see every detail. Ethan's hands on Emily's waist, the tense expression on the girl's face, her legs bent as if she could barely stand. Sarah felt an anger rise inside her chest, a fury she had never felt before. That man was hurting his daughter. He was using the trust of the community, the respect of the mothers, the innocence of the children, to do something terrible. And Sarah was going to stop that, even if it was the last thing he did. The next morning, Sarah woke up decided. She wasn't going to wait any longer. She would no longer try to convince other mothers. She would no longer seek support from those who did not believe in her. She was going to act alone, in a calculated, methodical way, gathering every piece of information she could find about Ethan Cole. She called the hospital, asked for time off for a few days, claiming a family emergency. Then he sat on the sofa in the living room with the laptop on his lap and began to investigate. Sarah typed Ethan's full name into Google, added the word dance, and started scrolling through the results pages. At first, he found only photos of recitals, articles from local newspapers praising his work in dance studios, profiles on social networks showing him smiling next to happy students. Everything seemed too perfect. But Sarah didn't give up. She added the names of the cities Ethan had mentioned when he introduced himself to the mothers on the first day. He had said that he had come from Charlotte, North Carolina, before moving to Orlando. Sarah researched, cross-referenced names, looked up old news, and finally found something. A short newspaper article from 3 years ago. The title read, "Charlotte Dance School Closes After Parent Complaints." Sarah clicked on the link with her heart racing and read every word. The article mentioned that a well-regarded dance school had suddenly closed after some parents raised concerns about one of the teachers' behavior with the younger female students. The professor's name was not mentioned directly, but the article said he had left town shortly after the investigations began. No formal charges had been made. No concrete evidence had been found. But the school closed, and the teacher disappeared. Sarah felt the blood run cold in her veins. Was it him? Had Ethan done this before in another city with other girls? She kept researching, scouring forums, parent groups, old social media pages. And then she found a post from a mother in a closed group of Charlotte's parents. The woman recounted, in a vague and emotional way, about how her daughter had completely changed after attending extra classes with a charismatic dance teacher, and how, when she started asking questions, the teacher had moved to another city and was never seen again. The post had only 3 comments, all from other mothers who said they had gone through something similar, but who had never been able to prove anything. Sarah felt a tightness in her chest. That was no coincidence. That was a pattern. Ethan wasn't just a questionable teacher. He was someone who knew exactly what he was doing, someone who had done it before, in other cities, with other families, and who knew how to avoid getting caught. He hid behind smiles, compliments, words like special and talent, and destroyed the innocence of vulnerable girls who just wanted to dance and be happy. That afternoon, Sarah went to the cafe in front of the dance studio. It was a small place, with scratched wooden tables, uncomfortable chairs, and a strong smell of burnt coffee mixed with the sweet of freshly baked cakes. She ordered a coffee and sat down by the window, from where she could see the entrance to the studio. After a few minutes, A young attendant, a girl in her 20s with hair tied in a scruffy ponytail, came to Sarah's desk to clean the surface. Sarah took the opportunity and struck up a conversation. "Have you been working here for a long time?" Sarah asked, trying to look casual. The girl smiled. "It's been about 2 years." "Why?" Sarah pointed discreetly to the dance studio across the street. "My daughter takes classes there." "Do you know the teacher, Ethan?" The girl made an expression that was difficult to decipher, something between discomfort and caution. "Yes, I do. He comes here from time to have coffee." Sarah leaned forward, lowering her voice. "And what do you think of it? He seems reliable?" The girl looked around, as if she were checking to see if anyone was listening, and then said in a low voice, "Look, I don't want to speak ill of anybody, but there's something strange about him. He always stays late in the studio, you know? Like too late. Sometimes I'm closing the cafe around 10 at night and it's still inside. And always with a girl. One at a time, you know? Never a group. Always alone with a girl." Sarah felt her heart race. "And do you think that's weird?" The girl shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe it's normal for a dance teacher. But I have a niece of the same age, and I would never leave her alone with a grown man until that time, you know? Even if he is a teacher. I think it's weird." Sarah thanked her for the conversation, left a generous tip, and left the cafe with her legs shaking. Every little bit of information she discovered confirmed what she already knew deep in her heart. Ethan was dangerous. Ethan was calculated. And Ethan was using Emily the same way he had probably used other girls before her. But now Sarah had something that Charlotte's other mothers didn't. She had a picture. She had the testimony of the cafe attendant. And she had the audio recording, even if incomplete. He had enough to start building a case, but it needed more. He needed something irrefutable, something that no one could deny or ignore. Sarah spent the next 2 days planning. She reviewed the dance school's contract line by line, looking for clauses about safety, about supervision, about what was allowed and what was not allowed during classes. He found a clause that said that no teacher could be alone with a student in a closed room, without the presence of another adult, or without the explicit written permission of the parents. Ethan was violating that clause every time he kept Emily alone after class. Sarah highlighted the excerpt, saved a copy of the contract, and kept it all in a folder on her computer. She also contacted the mother who had made the post in Charlotte's parents' group. He sent a private message, introducing himself, telling about Emily's situation, and asking if the woman would be willing to tell more about what had happened to her daughter. The answer came the next day, long, emotional, and devastating. The woman told how her daughter had begun to have nightmares, to tremble whenever she saw men with beards similar to Ethan's, how she had developed a fear of enclosed places and being alone with adults. She told how, when she finally managed to get her daughter to talk, the girl revealed that the teacher had touched her in ways that were not appropriate, always saying that it was part of the dance technique, always asking for secrecy, always making her feel special and at the same time afraid of disappointing him. The mother said she tried to report it, but that Ethan had already left town, that there was no physical evidence, and that the school had closed without explanation. She ended the message by saying, "If you have a chance to stop him now, for God's sake, do it. Don't let your daughter go through what mine went through." Sarah read the message with tears streaming down her face. She responded by thanking her, promising that she would do everything in her power to protect Emily and other girls, and asked for permission to use the woman's testimony if she needed to. The woman agreed, saying she would do anything to prevent Ethan from hurting any more children. With all this information in hand, Sarah knew she needed to act fast, but she also knew she couldn't do it alone. It needed authorities. He needed someone with the power to come into that studio, stop what was happening, and make sure Ethan would never have access to children again. Then one Wednesday morning, Sarah picked up the phone and called the administrative director of the dance school, a woman named Margaret Thompson, who had legal responsibility for all the teachers and students at the studio. Sarah set up an urgent meeting, saying she needed to talk about safety issues related to Emily's classes. Margaret agreed to meet Sarah the next morning in her studio office. Sarah spent the night without sleep, organizing documents, printing conversations, saving photos and recordings on a USB stick. She prepared everything as if she were putting together a court case, because she knew that if she didn't have solid evidence, she would be just another paranoid mother that no one would take seriously. On Thursday morning, Sarah put on a simple but professional outfit, grabbed the briefcase with all the documents, and drove to the studio. Her heart was beating so hard that she felt the pulses in her throat. When he arrived, he went straight to Margaret's office, a small, cramped room at the back of the building, filled with stacked files and old recitals posters. Margaret was a woman in her 60s, with grey hair tied back in a bun, reading glasses hanging around her neck, and the tired expression of someone who had been dealing with administrative problems for decades. "Sarah, thank you for coming," Margaret said, pointing to a chair. "Sit down, please. Did you say you needed to talk about security?" Sarah sat down, placed the briefcase on the table, and took a deep breath. "Yes, Margaret. I need to talk about Professor Ethan Cole and his behavior with my daughter Emily and possibly other students." Margaret frowned. "Behavior? Ethan is one of our best teachers. We never had any complaints about him." Sarah opened the briefcase and began to take out documents, one by one, placing them on the table. "I understand that he is well regarded, but I need you to see this. Here's a photo I received from an unknown number showing my daughter alone with him in the room, in a position that doesn't make sense for a dance class. Here is an audio recording where he says that it is just the part of the two and asks for secrecy. Here is the school's contract, where it says that no teacher can be alone with a student without parental permission. Here's the testimony of a mother from Charlotte, where he worked before and where the school closed after similar complaints. And here's the timeline showing that my daughter has been shaking, anxious, and changing her behavior since she started these extra classes." Margaret picked up the documents one by one, read every word, listened to the recording with the headphones Sarah had brought, and the expression on her face gradually changed from distrust to concern, and finally to shock. When she finished reviewing everything, she took off her glasses, rubbed her eyes, and said in a trembling voice, "My God, Sarah, I didn't know any of this. If what you're saying is true, it is very serious." Sarah felt immense relief when she realized that finally someone was taking her concerns seriously. "I know it's serious, Margaret, and that's why I need you to help me. I need us to involve the authorities, to do something official before he hurts more girls." Margaret nodded slowly. "I'm going to call the city school board. They have a child protection department that handles cases like this, and I'm going to call the police as well. If there are indications of inappropriate behavior, they need to investigate. But Sarah, you need to be prepared. This will be difficult. There will be people who will defend him. There will be people who will say that you are exaggerating. Are you ready for it?" Sarah looked into Margaret's eyes and said firmly, "I'm ready. Because if I do nothing and something worse happens to my daughter or another child, I will never forgive myself." Margaret picked up the phone and started making the calls. In less than an hour, everything was organized. A school board representative, a social worker, and 2 police officers would come to the studio the next afternoon, unannounced, to observe one of Ethan's classes and, if necessary, intervene. Sarah went home with her heart still racing, but for the first time in weeks, she felt real hope. It was going to end that. He was going to protect Emily. It was going to prevent Ethan from hurting anyone else. That night, Sarah sat next to Emily on the girl's bed. Emily was wearing pink pajamas with ballerina designs, hugging the teddy bear, looking at her mother with big, scared eyes. "Mom, why are you looking at me like that?" asked the girl in a low voice. Sarah ran her hand through her daughter's hair, smelling strawberry shampoo, and said in a choked voice, "Because I love you, my love, more than anything in this world. And I want you to know that no matter what, I'll always have your back." Emily frowned. "What happens, Mom?" Sarah hesitated, not knowing if she should tell. But then he decided that Emily deserved to know the truth, or at least part of it. "Love, tomorrow some people will visit the dance studio. Important people who take care of the safety of children. They will observe the class, and they may ask some questions. I need you to be brave, to tell the truth if someone asks you something, okay?" Emily turned pale. She bit her lower lip and whispered, "It's because of Professor Ethan, right?" Sarah felt her heart tighten. "Yes, my love. It's because of him." Emily began to cry, silent tears streaming down her face. I wanted to tell you, Mom, but he said that no one would believe me. He said I was special, and that if I told anyone, I would ruin everything. I was afraid." Sarah pulled Emily into a tight embrace, feeling her daughter's small body tremble against hers. "You have done nothing wrong, my love. Nothing. He is the wrong one. He shouldn't have asked you to keep secrets. He shouldn't have touched you in a way that made you uncomfortable. And now we're going to make sure he never does that to any child again. Okay?" Emily nodded, sobbing, and the two of them stood there hugging for a long time, until the girl finally fell asleep, still shivering slightly. Sarah covered her with the blanket, gave her a kiss on the forehead, and left the room heartbroken, but also with a steely determination. Tomorrow would be the day. Tomorrow everything would change. If you're here, it's because this story deserves to be heard. I believe that what comes next will surprise you even more. Don't leave this video before you find out how it all ended. Friday afternoon arrived with a clear and sunny sky, typical of Florida. Sarah woke up early, prepared breakfast for Emily, and the two took it in silence. Emily barely touched the food, just stirred the cereal with her spoon, looking at the plate with her eyes red from crying so much the night before. Sarah tried to talk, tried to calm her daughter, but the words wouldn't come out. She herself was too nervous. That was the day when everything would be revealed. The day when the truth would finally come out. At 3 in the afternoon, Sarah took Emily to the dance studio. She parked the car in the parking lot, as she always did, but this time she noticed an inconspicuous official car parked on the corner with tinted windows. It was the school board and the police, already in position, waiting for the right moment. Sarah shook Emily's hand and said, "You're the bravest girl I know. Remember that, okay?" Emily nodded, took a deep breath, and got out of the car. The two walked to the entrance of the studio. The hallway was full of mothers and girls, as always. Sarah greeted some acquaintances, forced smiles, and sat down in one of the folding chairs leaning against the wall, pretending it was just another normal day. Emily entered the dance room with the other girls, and the class began. About 15 minutes later, Margaret appeared in the hallway, accompanied by a woman in a grey suit whom Sarah recognized as being from the school board, and a man in police uniform. They didn't make noise, they didn't attract attention. They just stood there, watching through the glass window of the dance room. Sarah got up from her chair and walked over to them. Margaret nodded, indicating that everything was going according to plan. The class went on normally for about 40 minutes. Ethan taught the steps, corrected the girls, smiled, praised. Everything seemed perfect as always. But then, when the bell rang indicating the end of class, the girls began to leave one by one, grabbing their backpacks, running into their mother's arms, and, as always, Emily stayed behind. Sarah saw Ethan approach her daughter, lean over, whisper something in her ear. Emily looked at the door, saw her mother watching, and her eyes filled with tears. Ethan noticed that there were more people in the hallway than the usual mothers. He frowned, but kept his polite smile. "Hello? Can I help with something?" he asked, still holding Emily's shoulder. Margaret stepped forward. "Ethan, this is Mr. Roberts of the City School Board, and Officer Jenkins of the police. They would like to ask you some questions about the extra classes you have been giving to some students." Ethan's smile faltered for a split second, but he quickly pulled himself together. Of course. There is no problem at all, but I'm in the middle of a class right now. Can we talk later?" Officer Jenkins stepped forward. "Actually, sir, we prefer to talk now, and we'd like to watch that extra class if you don't mind." Ethan hesitated. He looked at Emily, who was standing there trembling, and then looked at Sarah, who was standing in the doorway with her arms crossed, her face tense. He realized at that moment that he was cornered. "Well, actually, today I hadn't planned any extra lessons. Emily can go with her mother, no problem." Sarah stepped forward, entering the room. "Funny, Ethan, because in the last 6 weeks you have always asked her to stay. I always said it was special. He always closed the shutters and asked for secrecy. Why is it different today?" Ethan turned pale. He opened his mouth to answer, but not a word came out. Officer Jenkins moved even closer. "Mr. Cole, Mrs. Miller here has lodged some serious complaints about the gentleman's behavior with her daughter and possibly other students. I'm going to need you to come with us to answer some questions at the police station." "This is ridiculous," Ethan exploded, finally losing his composure. "I am a dedicated teacher. I just want the best for these girls. Sarah is completely crazy, seeing things that don't exist." Sarah stepped forward, taking her phone out of her pocket. "Crazy? Then explain to me this photo I received, showing you holding my 10-year-old daughter in a totally inappropriate way, alone in this room, with the blinds closed. Explain to me the audio recording where you say that it is the part of just the two of them. Explain to me why you moved from Charlotte after a school closed due to complaints from parents about inappropriate behavior by a teacher, and explain to me why my daughter trembles every time she hears her name." The silence that followed was deafening. Margaret was pale, holding her hand to her mouth. Officer Jenkins had his hand on the radio, ready to call for reinforcements. And Ethan was there, in the center of the room, his face red with anger and his hands shaking. He tried to take a step towards the back door, but the officer blocked the way. "You're not going to leave here, Mr. Cole. We will need you to come with us now. And we'll need access to your office, your computer, and any material you have related to classes." Margaret took the keys and led the officer and the council representative to Ethan's small office, a tiny room at the back of the studio, filled with folders, DVDs of choreography, and an old laptop on the table. As they searched, Sarah ran over to Emily, who was standing in the corner of the room, shaking violently, her hands covering her face. Sarah pulled her into a tight embrace and whispered, "It's over, my love. It's over. You are safe now." Emily sobbed against her mother's shoulder. "I was afraid to tell you, Mom. I thought no one would believe me. He said it was normal, that it was part of the dance, that I was special, but I didn't like it. I was afraid every time I was alone with him." Sarah felt tears run down her face. "I will always believe in you, my love. Always. You were very brave, very much." About 20 minutes later, Officer Jenkins walked out of the office holding a sealed laptop in a clear plastic bag. We found several folders with videos and photos of underage girls in questionable situations. We need a full forensic analysis, but from what we've seen so far, there are enough elements to open a formal investigation. Mr. Cole, you are being detained for questioning. You have the right to remain silent." Ethan tried to protest, tried to say that it was all a misunderstanding, that the videos were just records of choreographies, but the officer did not listen. He was handcuffed right there, in front of Sarah, Emily, Margaret, and some mothers who had returned to the studio when they heard the commotion. Sarah saw the man who had terrorized her daughter for weeks being led outside, head down, while other mothers began to cry, realizing that their daughters had also been victims and that they simply hadn't seen the signs. One of the mothers, Jennifer, the same one who had said that Ethan was a sweetheart, ran up to Sarah with her eyes red from crying. Sarah, I'm sorry, I should have believed you. My daughter was also alone with him. I thought it was normal. Sarah held her hand and said firmly, "It wasn't your fault. He knew how to hide. He knew how to make us trust. But now we know the truth, and we will protect our daughters from now on." In the days that followed, the story spread through the community like wildfire. The school board opened a full investigation, and 3 other mothers came forward saying that their daughters had also gone through similar experiences with Ethan. The police found on his laptop videos of extra classes where he touched the girls in totally inappropriate ways, always with excuses that he was correcting his posture or teaching advanced techniques. There were also messages exchanged with the girls where he asked for secrecy and said that they were special. The evidence was irrefutable. In less than 2 weeks, Ethan Cole was formally charged with multiple counts of inappropriate behavior with minors and abuse of a position of trust. This story is not for everyone. If you are here, it is because you want to know the truth behind the facts. Are you ready for the final reveal? Ethan Cole's trial took place 6 months later in a Florida courtroom filled with mothers, fathers, journalists, and child protection activists. Sarah was there, sitting in the front row, holding Emily's hand. The girl had agreed to testify, even though she was afraid, even though she was shaking, because she wanted other children not to go through what she went through. When she was called to the witness stand, Emily climbed up with trembling legs, but with her head held high. She told, in a low but firm voice, about the extra classes, about the inappropriate touches, about the requests for secrecy, about how special she felt but at the same time she was afraid, about how she thought no one would believe her because he was so loved by everyone. When Emily finished speaking, there wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. The judge thanked her for her courage, and the defense attorney could not contradict the testimony, especially given the hard evidence found on Ethan's laptop and the testimonies of 4 other girls who were also his victims. At the end of the trial, Ethan Cole was sentenced to 15 years in prison, banned from working with children for life, and registered as a sex offender. The sentence was met with silent applause in the courtroom, and Sarah hugged Emily so tightly that she felt her heart burst with relief and gratitude. In the months that followed, Emily began therapy with a child psychologist who specializes in trauma. The sessions were weekly, in a bright and welcoming clinic full of colorful toys and picture books. The psychologist, Dr. Melissa Carter, was a kind woman in her 40s who knew exactly how to make Emily feel safe and heard. Gradually, the tremors began to subside. Nightmares have become less frequent. Emily smiled again, went back to spinning around the living room of the house as she did before, started dreaming about dancing again, but now in a new studio, with a new teacher, an experienced woman who had impeccable references and who always kept the doors open during classes. Sarah, in turn, became something of a silent hero in the community. Other mothers began to seek her out, asking for advice on how to recognize danger signs, on how to trust the maternal instinct even when everyone says you are overreacting. Sarah created a small support group which met once a month in a local church community room, where mothers shared experiences, fears, and protection strategies. She never wanted to be the center of attention, but she knew that her story could help other families avoid what she and Emily had been through. One afternoon, almost a year after Ethan was arrested, Sarah and Emily were sitting on the living room couch, watching an animated movie. Emily was lying with her head in her mother's lap, eating popcorn, laughing at the jokes in the movie. Sarah ran her hand through her daughter's hair, feeling a peace she hadn't felt in a long time. Suddenly, Emily paused the movie, sat down, and looked at her mother with serious eyes. "Mum, can I ask you something?" "Of course, my love." "What was it?" Emily hesitated, bit her lip, and then said, "Did you always know something was wrong? From the beginning?" Sarah took a deep breath, thinking about the right answer. "No, love. At first I wasn't sure. I just felt that something wasn't right. It was a tightness in the chest, a fear that I couldn't explain, but I trusted that feeling, and I'm glad I did. Emily nodded slowly. I'm happy too, because if you hadn't believed me, I don't think you would have ever told anyone. Sarah pulled her daughter into a hug and whispered, I'll always believe in you, Emily. Always, no matter what. You are my daughter and I will protect you until the end of my days. Emily hugged her mother tightly, and the two of them stood there on the couch, hugging in silence, until the sun began to set outside, tinting the sky orange and pink. It was a new beginning. A new beginning. And for the first time in a long time, Sarah allowed herself to feel hope that the worst was behind her. Before we continue, help bring real stories to those who really care. If you want to be part of this mission, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell. In the months following Ethan Cole's trial and conviction, Sarah began to deeply understand the significance of what had happened. It wasn't just about saving Emily. It wasn't just about having stopped a predator. It was about something much bigger, something that touched the essence of what it means to be a mother in a world where it's not always easy to know who to trust. Sarah began to receive messages from mothers in other cities, from other states, who had read about the case in the newspapers or seen reports on local television. They all told similar stories. Stories of daughters who changed their behavior, of teachers or coaches who asked for secrecy, of maternal instincts ignored because society said they were exaggerating. One such message came from a woman named Patricia from Tampa, who told how her 9-year-old daughter had started having nightmares after joining a gymnastics team. The coach was adored by everyone, always kind, always charismatic. Patricia had felt something strange, but ignored it, thinking it was paranoia, until he read Sarah's story and decided to ask more direct questions to his daughter. The girl revealed that the coach touched them during stretches in a way that made her uncomfortable, always saying that she was a technician, always asking for secrecy. Patricia immediately denounced it, and an investigation was opened. She wrote to Sarah saying, "Your courage has given me courage. If you hadn't spoken, I would have continued to ignore my instinct. Thank you for saving not only your daughter but mine as well." Sarah kept each of these messages in a folder on her computer. She read them all, cried with many, and answered whenever she could. She didn't want to be seen as a hero, but she understood that her story had become bigger than her. It had become an example, a warning, a reminder that trusting the maternal instinct is not madness. It is protection. She began to give lectures in schools, in churches, in community centers, always with Emily by her side when the girl felt comfortable to be present. Sarah talked about the signs she had ignored at first, about how she almost gave up investigating because no one believed her, about how the courage to act saved her daughter from something much worse. In one of these lectures, held in a hall full of concerned mothers and fathers, Sarah said something that was etched in the memory of many. She was on the small stage, holding the microphone with her hands still shaking slightly, and said in a firm voice, "I'm not special. I am no braver than any of you. I only did what any mother would do if she trusted what she felt. The problem is that we live in a world that teaches us to doubt ourselves, that tells us that we are exaggerating, that we are seeing danger where there is none, that we are being controlling or paranoid. But I've learned that when it comes to our children, there's no such thing as exaggeration. There is protection, and if you feel like something is wrong, it probably is. Don't ignore that feeling. Don't let anyone make you doubt him, because that feeling may be the only thing standing between your child and a real danger." The hall erupted in applause. Several mothers stood up, some crying, others nodding in agreement. Sarah saw in the eyes of those women the same fear she had felt, the same doubt, the same loneliness, and she realized that she was no longer alone, that none of them were alone, that together they could create a protection net much stronger than any predator could cross. Emily, who was sitting in the front row, smiled at her mother. She had grown so much in the last few months, not just physically but emotionally. Therapy with Dr. Melissa had helped her process the trauma, to understand that nothing that had happened was her fault, to rebuild trust in adults and in herself. Emily still trembled from time to time, especially when she heard certain songs or saw men with beards similar to Ethan's. But now she knew how to deal with those moments. He knew how to take a deep breath, talk about what he felt, ask for help when he needed it. And most of all, she knew she would never again have to keep secrets that hurt her. Sarah has also changed. She went from being just a nurse who worked long shifts to coming home exhausted. She became an activist, a voice for children who couldn't speak, an advocate for mothers who were ignored. She helped create, along with other mothers in the community, a safety protocol for dance schools, sports and extracurricular activities in Orlando. The protocol required that no teacher or coach could be alone with a child in a closed room without the presence of another adult or without visible security cameras. It also demanded that all activities be transparent, without secrets, without locked doors, without requests for silence, and it demanded that any complaints from parents be taken seriously immediately, without being dismissed as paranoia or exaggeration. The protocol was adopted by several schools and studios in the region and began to spread to other cities. Sarah knew she couldn't change the whole world, but she could change small parts of it. It could make other girls not go through what Emily went through. It could make other mothers not feel the loneliness she felt, and that, for her, was more than enough. 3 years after Ethan Cole's arrest, Sarah and Emily were sitting in the kitchen at home, baking cookies together. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon, with the sun streaming in through the window and the smell of vanilla filling the air. Emily was 13 now, taller, more confident, and spoke openly about what had happened whenever she thought she could help someone. She had become something of a spokesperson among the children, visiting schools and telling her story to other girls and boys, saying that it was important to speak up when something didn't feel right, that it was important to trust the adults who really cared, and that it was never ever the child's fault when an adult did something wrong. As they put the cookies in the oven, Emily looked at her mother and said, "Mum, do you think he still thinks about me?" In Ethan. Sarah stopped, dried her hands on the tea towel, and looked at her daughter. "Maybe, love, but what matters is not what he thinks. What matters is that he will never be able to hurt you or any other child again. He is in prison, and he will be imprisoned for many years to come." Emily nodded thoughtfully. "I don't feel afraid of him anymore, you know. I don't know. Too bad. Because he could have been a good person, a real teacher, but he chose to be what he was. And now he has lost everything." Sarah hugged her daughter, impressed by her maturity. "You're amazing, you know. You are the strongest person I know." Emily smiled. "I learned from you, Mum." And the two of them stood there, hugging in the middle of the kitchen, waiting for the cookies to bake, knowing that the worst was over, but that the lessons learned would stay forever. When it was all over, months after Ethan's arrest, Sarah still felt her body tremble every time she drove past any dance studio. The smell of waxed wood and cheap deodorant seemed to stick in the memory like a mark that does not fade. But as she looked at Emily sitting in the passenger seat, hugging her new school sweatshirt, no leotards, no heavy makeup, just a healthy growing child with a book on her lap, she knew she had done what needed to be done. I had heard that tightness in the chest that many mothers know, that silence at dawn in which something inside us screams that something is wrong, even if no one else sees it. At a neighborhood gathering on a cool evening in Orlando, other mothers approached Sarah with tears in their eyes. Some apologized for not having believed. Others said that their daughters began to remember moments that also made them uncomfortable, but that they were afraid to speak. Gradually, that story that began inside a closed room with mirrors and loud music turned into a chain of women who decided to pay more attention to every detail, to every change of mood, to every handshake that their daughters showed unintentionally. Sarah didn't see herself as a hero, but she knew that her decision had prevented many other girls from going through the same horror. At home, Emily still had nights when she woke up scared, with her legs shaking, saying that she dreamed of the dark room and the music that never stopped. At those times, Sarah would lie next to her, hug her tightly, and repeat the same phrase, like a simple prayer, "You'll never be alone behind a closed door again, I promise." Over time, the tremors subsided, the laughter filled the kitchen again during breakfast, and the girl discovered new dreams, far from that stage where she almost lost her peace. This story is not just about a dance teacher who took advantage of everyone's trust. It is, above all, about a mother who decided not to shut up her feelings, even when the whole world seemed to say she was overreacting. It is a reminder to every woman who watches that there is no such thing as too much protection when it comes to a child. If your heart tightens, if something doesn't make sense, if your daughter trembles before someone who should take care of her, it's worth asking, observing, insisting. One more question can avoid a lifelong mark. And the next time you hear someone say that a mother is seeing danger where there is none, remember Sarah and Emily, and how, thanks to the courage of a tired but attentive mother, one less predator was let loose in the world. If you've made it this far, it's because this story has touched your heart in some way. And that means you also care about the protection of our children, the strength of mothers, the importance of never ignoring that tightness in your chest that warns us when something is wrong. Don't leave now. Take the next step in this journey by watching the next video on our channel, which will appear here on the screen. In it, we will continue to discover stories that touch the heart and that can make a difference in the lives of many families. Don't forget to leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell so you don't miss any of our stories. A big hug, and see you in the next exciting story.